Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
So our main news on Sunrise this morning is something that's been described as too costly, but it's too late to do anything about it. It's a damning assessment of universal credit by the government spending watchdog. In a scathing report, the National Audit Office says the scheme's rollout has been too slow and is unlikely to ever deliver value for money. Now, the Department for Work and Pensions disagrees. It says the scheme will bring a £34 billion return over 10 years. James Matthews reports.
If there's a measure of universal credit impact, this Airdrie Food Bank might be it. It's operated through the change in the benefit system. Numbers needing help here have doubled.
The amount that they receive in universal credit is very low, and they have to heat their house, they've got other bills to pay, gas, electricity, and unfortunately when it comes to buying food, they're left with very little.
The food bank finding here is echoed in a damning report by the National Audit Office. And there's more. The spending watchdog says universal credit hasn't delivered value for money and that it might never. The report found the rollout of universal credit had been due by October last year, but as of today it's only being claimed by 10% of those entitled. Between January and October last year, of late payments, 40% were delayed by 11 weeks, 20% were almost 5 months late. In the same period, 1 claimant in 5 didn't receive full payment in time. 1 in 10 received no payment at all.
And we spoke to lots of national and local organisations that are working with the claimants, and they showed us enough evidence to really demonstrate that some, a significant minority, are struggling. These claimants are struggling to make their claim online. They're struggling to cope until they get their first payment, and they're struggling with the fluctuating income that universal credit provides.
Pauline Boyd claims universal credit. The report found that for people in her position, the Department of Work and Pensions hadn't assessed the hardship they suffer.
They don't pay you enough money to live on. There is no way. You know, I'm running a home on £317 a month. It is a complete struggle.
Despite its criticisms, the National Audit Office concludes that universal credit is here to stay. Returning to the previous benefits regime, it says, would be so complex and costly that there's no practical alternative but to continue on. In a statement, the Department of Work and Pensions said, universal credit is good value for money and is forecast to realise a return on investment of £34 billion over 10 years against a cost of £2 billion, with 200,000 more people in work. Furthermore, 83% of claimants are satisfied with the service, and the majority agree it financially motivates them to work. Others beg to differ. In its withering critique, the National Audit Office says universal credit could end up costing more than the system it replaces, and the government will never be able to measure its stated goal of increasing employment. James Matthews, Sky News.
So that scathing new report on the government's flagship benefit scheme says it's failed to deliver value for money and cause unnecessary hardship for many people. The National Audit Office says universal credit is too costly, but it is too late to do anything about it. Let's talk to Greg Beals, Director of Campaigns at the Housing and Homelessness charity Shelter. Good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to see you. Do you think universal credit is having a direct impact?
Oh, it's definitely having a direct impact. I mean, we really see it in two ways. First of all, it's just the amount of money that's actually getting through to people at the front line is not enough. And then the second problem are these delays in the system. And when you talk about wrapping together 6 different payments, everybody's income from 6 different sources, and then delaying it by weeks, in some cases months, what are people supposed to do in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, obviously with a new system, you are going to get glitches. The problem here is, of course, glitches are affecting real people in very real ways.
Absolutely. Well, and what's so damning about this report, of course, is that the NAO have actually got access to the internal government files, and what they're able to say is that the delays in the system are not something that can actually be removed by the system improving. Actually, the delays to payments are hardwired into the system. So the very thing that we've put in place, the welfare system that's supposed to help people getting into trouble, is actually working as an engine to push people into crisis.
But I mean, the argument from the government is it's also an engine that is meant to push people into work, and they say that is happening.
Well, and the NAO, which is, of course, the government's own financial watchdog, has said in this report that there's no evidence that it's going to improve the movement of people into work and that the system's going to end up costing more money than it saved. So it really is a very damning account, this, for the government's flagship welfare reform.
I mean, what sort of difference have you seen at Shelton? I mean, is there a sort of tangible sort of figure that you can put on how many people are being adversely affected that you've seen?
Yeah, so we're only in the early stages of the rollout, so only about 10% of people have moved on to the benefit, but we have seen certainly more than 100 cases of people being pushed into actual homelessness, so having to make homelessness applications because of the way the system's currently working. I mean, if the system rolls out as it is now across the country, we expect that to be in many thousands.
Yeah, right, understand. I mean, with those sort of figures, I mean, no one is saying, and no one would surely would dream of saying that is in any way the intention of these changes. So with that sort of data, you've got to be able to go to government, haven't you, and say, this needs to be altered, tweaked. I mean, the government says it's taking a listen and learn approach to the rollout of this. You've got to have some willing ears to talk to in government, haven't you?
Well, I hope so, and I really hope as well that today's report is going to create a change in the approach from the government. I mean, charities like mine, people working on the front line, have been saying for some time that these are real problems affecting real people. I think the depressing thing about today's report, if you like, is that the NAO clearly would like to say that the government should roll back the scheme and go back to some of the old system, and they say that's just not practical. So it really is now a question of trying to make this system as least damaging as possible.
But I mean, ultimately, don't forget the government is and ministers are denying this, and they say, despite what the National Audit Office is saying, that they will pull in £34 billion in 10 years. That's how much money they'll save. Now, that is if that happens, that's money that can be used to, you know, amongst other things, hopefully help alleviate some of the problems that you deal with.
Yeah, well, we should take seriously what the government say, but I think, remember, that the NAO here have had access to internal government documents. So, for example, this NAO report is the first time we know that the department's own documents say that they recognise 40% of recipients are in financial hardship. So there are certainly, the NAO has uncovered here evidence from the department that certainly the government's so far not made public.
OK, Greg, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. We'll be discussing this, of course, throughout the course of the day here on Sky News, so we keep you up to date with all the perspectives on this.
When the universal credit system was announced a few years ago, the government said it would be much more efficient than the old system of welfare benefits. It would get more people into work and it would cost less. Instead of the old benefits, 6 of them, there would be just the one. But the National Audit Office has just pronounced that it hasn't worked that way, and I'm joined in the studio by Joshua Redaway, who is the National Audit Office's Director of Work and Pensions Value for Money Programme, and also on the line by Rebecca Smidmore, who receives universal credit. And let me ask you first, if I may, Ms. Smidmore, what has happened to you? Why did you need some form of benefit in the first place?
Hi, John. Well, I was actually on a few of the legacy benefits, and we moved house into a universal credit area, which then prompted the changeover. So we applied, and I had to do a lot of research to actually understand it in the first place, really. It is quite confusing, and it has only taken me nearly a year now that I've been on it, that I understand my part of it. There are so many different parts of it.
Right, but apart from it being complicated, because you're a full-time carer, as I understand it, for your disabled son.
Yes, I am.
And what has it meant that you've lost any money, or you had to wait a long time to get the money, or what?
Essentially, we receive the same amount of money every month. Essentially, if I average it out. The issue here is that my husband works, so he gets a wage, and Universal Credit give you an assessment period where they assess what you get from wages within that time. My husband's payday from work is very close to our assessment period, so if he's paid 1 or 2 days early because of the weekend, then they think he's earned double the amount.
Oh.
So in that case, our universal credit is heavily reduced. We don't then qualify for free prescriptions or dental treatment, which we would do normally.
Right. And it seems random, you say, because you could get £1,000 a month, but sometimes it might be only 300 and no backdated payments.
No backdated payments. We waited 5 weeks for our payment, which, from what I've heard, is actually good. 5 weeks. There have been many people that have waited a lot longer.
Makes it very difficult to budget.
It does make it very difficult to budget, and I've just now, after nearly a year, just got the hang of it. It is difficult trying to budget when you're not quite sure what's coming in, and we have to put money aside to make sure that when we only get a little amount from Universal Credit, that we can survive.
Right, but would you prefer to go back to the old system?
Definitely.
You would.
Definitely.
But Joshua Redaway, the NOA is not saying go back to the old system. You're not saying scrap this one.
No, we're not saying scrap it, we're saying that the department should get it right. But we're now into the 8th year of rolling it out, and we had expected that by now the Department for Work and Pensions should be able to demonstrate that it's working. Instead, we've had to conclude that it's not value for money, and we're not sure that it ever will be.
And what we've just heard from Rebecca suggests that I mean, that is typical, is it? Well, I suppose nothing is typical because all cases are a bit different, but...
There are lots of different things we've heard, but it's not atypical of the sort of thing we've heard from the organisations that work with claimants up and down the country.
And we have heard endlessly from government that the one clear benefit is that more people are now going into work than claiming benefits. I mean, there has been a big increase in the number of people coming off benefits and going into work. Is that not the case?
Well, the department wants Universal Credit to get an extra 200,000 people into work. It's therefore, we felt quite unfortunate that it's now concluded that it won't be able to measure exactly how many people are going into work as a result of Universal Credit.
Right, so it might be 200,000?
Well, it might be a number that go in. It might be fewer people that go in. They can't measure it.
Why not?
It's technical issues to do with the economic modelling, but essentially they can't isolate the impact of Universal Credit from other economic factors.
But they would know, if somebody stops claiming benefit, they would know that they had stopped claiming benefit. You'd think it'd be easy enough to add up those people.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. There are various things they can measure. There are various things they should have measured by now. In fact, they had a programme that was due to report a year ago that did that sort of measurement. Even if they did do that, and they do hope to be able to do that in future, it falls short of proving that Universal Credit's actually created more jobs. And that's because just because an individual that's been on Universal Credit may or may not be more likely to go in, other people may come out and there's different effects.
But is it possible to say, look, yeah, it has taken longer than they'd expected, but it may well be, if you did another audit in 1 year from now or 2 years from now, that all those things they had hoped for have in fact come true?
Well, we really hope that this programme will work. We're not trying to say that it definitely won't, but what we are saying is they should have been able to demonstrate by now that it is value for money, and they've not been able to do that. In particular, there's a real risk that it will actually end up costing more than the benefit system that it's replaced, and they will never be able to prove that it's actually had the desired impact of getting everybody into work.
Joshua Redaway, Rebecca Smith-Moore, thank you both very much.